Is it right for Ukraine to join NATO? Ukraine's NATO membership is crucial if the West wants to prevent Vladimir Putin or a future Russian leader like Putin from attacking Ukraine again. The organization could incorporate Ukraine, which now has Europe's largest and most combat troops, increase training along NATO lines, and use NATO standard equipment. Although access to truth depends on the political will of NATO leaders. So far, there are indications that the Vilnius NATO meeting will not give Ukraine a clear path for membership, and that accession will only be possible after the war is over. Go, encourage Putin to fight. NATO leaders must be brave. Putin has refused to attack the alliance directly, but is happy to use obscurity. Years-long threats to Ukraine's independence from Russia will not go away because NATO shows restraint. At the very least, NATO should increase its range of weapons and ammunition. For most allies, it doesn't make sense to keep some, just when war has already broken out in Europe. Even better, though not as well as NATO members, the cooperation between the interests of both sides, as the Americans provide to Japan and South Korea, is a real protection supported by Western troops on Ukrainian soil and, at least, by the British and French nuclear deterrence. Eric Ciaramella Sr., Carnegie Endowment for International Peace Russia and Eurasia Program member. Yes, but it won't take long. NATO allies cannot be trusted to invite Ukraine to join until the war is over. From where? Accession would entail one of four possible problems. First, Ukraine could fight to join NATO fully until all its territories are independent. This can take years and can be costly. Second, Ukraine could join NATO like a splinter, as West Germany did in 1955. This will leave millions of Ukrainians unemployed and make the division of regions eternal. Third, as some have suggested, NATO could use the ambiguous text of Article 5 to issue specific warnings against Ukraine. This weakens NATO. Fourth, NATO could intervene to help Ukraine adjust its borders. Impossible. It is understandable why Kiev asked NATO for an explanation in Vilnius. But the invitation to war only reaffirms the announcement of the Bucharest Conference in 2008, without giving a clear path to participation and adding no guarantees of security. Instead, Ukraine and its partners should develop a temporary security system to allow Russia to defend itself before it changes course. That day is unlikely to come, at least until Vladimir Putin is now the president of Russia. After his death, Russia will face another period of internal turmoil, as in 1917 and 1991. Then NATO must act quickly to recognize Ukraine. Marta Dast, Senior Advisor for European Affairs, Aspen Institute, Rome. As the war continues, Kiev's willingness to participate is unconvincing. The United States and most Europeans refuse to cross the red line of direct conflict between Russia and NATO. The potential difference between Ukrainians' legitimate membership expectations and Western values stems from three issues. First, how to avoid repeating the mistake NATO made at the 2008 Bucharest meeting, when it made vague promises to Ukraine and Georgia but made no real commitment. It turned out to be the worst combination. Secondly, how to ensure long-term stability in order not to involve Kiev itself. Third, how to manage uptime. Vladimir Putin needs to be convinced that time is not on his side and that the Western allies will not tolerate the return of Kyiv. However, tying Ukraine to the end of hostilities might give Russia an incentive to continue the war. Ultimately, only military advances in Ukraine can force Putin to change his mind. This will require more military assistance from the West, while the de facto integration of Ukraine will require full membership. As a result of Russian aggression, Ukraine's position in the European security environment has undergone irreversible changes. It is not a non-state, if it ever was, but a border state. The middle form, then, has lost all meaning, as evidenced by Sweden and Finland. It's important to make sure Moscow understands this. NATO is committed to preserving Ukraine's independence over the long term, ensuring Russia repeats its mistakes in 2014 and 2022. A credible vision is as important for Ukraine as it is for the West. Russia must ask itself why all the people under its yoke want to commit crimes in the first place. Instead, Russia continues to see sovereign states as pawns on a chessboard for hegemonic powers to serve their own interests. This is not the case for NATO. Few actors in the West are personally interested in NATO enlargement. Progress can add depth to competition, but it also leads to disadvantages, strategy uncertainty, and tactical problems. If Russia is smart, it will want NATO to expand, just as Britain wants the EU to expand to dilute it and reduce its power. The possibility of Ukraine and Georgia joining NATO in 2008 is one of the main reasons for Russia's opposition to these two countries. Intelligence shows that NATO can only include countries that have resolved regional disputes. Russia created these problems to prevent the two countries from joining NATO. We cannot let this idea succeed. Martin Elchiv, Hospodsk Noviny analyst. Yes, but it is time dependent. No, if we look at the Vilnius meeting. Yes, if we, as a coalition, are serious about guaranteeing security for Ukraine, the failure of the Budapest Memorandum of Understanding has shown that the limitations of the international agreement model have been answered. It is absolutely ridiculous to think about joining NATO during the war, but on the other hand, there has been a lot of nonsense before, such as Finland's entry into NATO after February 24, 2022, and the surrender of heavy weapons. I hope that the Central European and Baltic member states will work in this direction and at least find some solutions suitable for long-term access, if not now. We live in extraordinary times that require new solutions. Expectations are high on the Ukrainian side, and it is essential for the Kyiv government to manage prospects and ensure long-term popular support for the war. A more realistic short-term approach would be to send long-range weapons and aircraft as soon as possible to learn the war for the alliance. There is no doubt that Ukraine should become a member of NATO. The sooner the better for all of us. Camille Grandet, Distinguished Policy Member, European Council on Foreign Relations, ECFR. Ukraine looks forward to the path to NATO membership beyond the conflict at the 2008 Bucharest meeting in Vilnius. Kyiv has made it clear that it expects the temporary guarantee to be stronger than the security guarantee of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. In fact, This can be combined with the establishment of the NATO-Ukraine Council, making Ukraine more involved in cooperation work and as a tool for planning the next future cooperation. It is a sure way. NATO's planned membership, which now appears to be willfully postponed, and removal of preconditions for temporary stability. He then made it clear that he should enter once the decision starts to work. However, Ukraine should be transparent and allies should make it clear that Russia will not veto Ukraine's members to create a compromise or illiquidity. The accession of the Federal Republic of Germany to NATO in 1955 increased the 35 years by prioritizing the integration of Germany along its existing borders. François Haysberg, Special Advisor to the Training Mission. The NATO choice is less clear than that of all NATO members. The Israeli model that some see in the White House applies to Israel when it is not at peace, when its security is ultimately dependent on national nuclear deterrence, and where the Ukrainian state does not possess nuclear weapons. Article 42.7 Mutual Defense Clause of the EU Treaty does not make the United States of America and is not considered genuine NATO. Article 5 by many EU countries. So it will come from Russia soon. Any revision of the negative Budapest Memorandum will not be accepted by Russia or Ukraine alone. All these options are very ineffective and weak strategies. It's just NATO. Neither the former Soviet Union nor Russia has attempted to oppose NATO. Article 5, and yet NATO's eastward expansion poses a serious problem, let alone the spy belly. The Ukrainian model would be West Germany's entry into NATO in 1955, made possible by Bonn's abandonment of the military option in October 1954. While the Soviet Union retained de facto control of East Germany, the West reiterated that peace, a goal achieved in 1990, is still the main goal. Can Crimea follow the same path? In conclusion, the fact that Germany is a divided country and its eastern border is unclear does not prevent it from joining NATO. In the post-war environment, what worked for the German geese should work for the Ukrainian geese. Director Linas Kojala Center for Eastern European Studies, Vilnius. Yes, Ukrainian cooperation is welcome. Although it may not look like today, a window of opportunity will open. Therefore, Ukraine should be prepared to take advantage of the opportunity. Just a few years before the Baltic states joined NATO, many skeptics doubted that this would happen. A direct comparison between Ukraine and the Baltic states is inappropriate, but it shows that geopolitical dynamics can change rapidly. NATO should also make it clear to Russia that it has no veto power over Ukraine's accession. The idea that Ukraine's unity will only be possible after the war will encourage the Kremlin to prolong the conflict indefinitely, even if it is less powerful. Although there are many difficulties Ukraine faces, it can get membership if it continues on the right path with determination. The country prepares for entry with Western equipment on the front lines every day.